Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you are looking at Earth from very far away, like a quiet green lantern drifting through the endless darkness of the universe. Among the billions of cold and barren planets out there, only this one glows with the color of life. And what gives it that hue is nothing more than a simple, transparent, motionless liquid. Yet, it is this very liquid that has written the entire history of our world. Water, something so familiar that we often forget its power and its mysteries, is the foundation upon which life formed. Mountains were carved, rivers became history, and civilizations rose and fell. Without water, there would be no us. But the question humanity has carried from ancient times to modern laboratories is this: where did water come from? What makes it the only miracle in the universe we know? In this 20-part journey of the series Blue Gold, we will travel from the primordial oceans 4.5 billion years ago to the empires sustained by rivers, the wars fought over every drop, and the future in which water may become more precious than real gold. Before we begin this long and gentle voyage, as soft as drifting into sleep, I want to thank you. This is Deep Sleep History, where we retell history in a slow breath and the soft glow of knowledge. If you enjoy this journey, please support the channel with a subscription, a like, and a suggestion for the next topic in the comments. And now, let us return to the beginning of everything, to the moment when Earth had no idea it would one day carry life. Before there were blue oceans stretching to the horizon, before Earth had even taken its first gentle breath after its chaotic early days, water had already begun a journey so long it defies imagination. A journey without voices, without witnesses, yet filled with mysteries powerful enough to alter the fate of an entire planet. And, strangely, this soft, yielding liquid did not arrive with thunder or lightning, but with the cold patience of the universe. Imagine a silent expanse where the oldest dust particles drift like snow through emptiness. Inside them, tiny water molecules lie still, as if waiting for a place worthy of beginning their existence. They move quietly through infinite darkness, clinging to wandering shards of ice, hitching rides on mute meteorites. Perhaps they did not know that after millions of years of wandering, some of them would fall onto a young blazing planet and transform it into the only home life could ever find. That is what makes water a miracle. It does not belong to Earth, it came to Earth. And the day this planet cooled enough to touch water, the sky seemed to open, not with gentle streaks of light, but with rains that fell endlessly. For thousands of years, people say, as if the universe poured all its cold memories into one place. Each drop that touched the glowing red ground rose back into steam, thickened, and fell again, a loop so persistent it bordered on meditation. After a very long time, when the last thin clouds dissolved, Earth looked upon itself for the first time, before it lay wide, deep, silent bodies of water, carrying a raw beauty that sent chills through the stone beneath. These primordial oceans were not as gentle as today's seas. They were darker, heavier with minerals, shadowed as though concealing a secret. Yet within that dimness, Earth found something almost no other place in the universe possessed, a place where water could stay. No creature witnessed the moment the oceans formed, but if someone had been there, they would have seen a coincidence so beautiful it felt frightening. A distance just right for water not to evaporate, a coolness just right for it not to freeze entirely, a gravity just strong enough to hold every drop. All of it intertwined as if the universe were writing a perfect play, with water as the leading actor who never missteps. And within that vast scene, water offered Earth a gift no light could match: softness, gentleness, healing. It soothed the cooling lava flows, smoothed jagged stone, and wrapped itself around every crack of the young planet like a hand offered from the heavens. Every wave, every raindrop, every tide seemed to retell an ancient story no one had yet learned to understand. If we listen closely, we may notice water has always carried a particular sound, a sound spoken without words, yet capable of calming an entire world. Perhaps that sound was what invited the very first hints of life to gather, not through an explosion, but through a faint warming at the ocean floor, where the deepest darkness met the quiet breath of the earth. From there, in waters still heavy with minerals, the smallest movements began to appear. First came slow spirals of hot and cold currents. Then clusters of shapeless matter drifted together, parted, and found each other again. No one knows the exact moment the shift occurred, when the inanimate brushed against intention. All we know is that somewhere within those rough waters, another miracle, quieter even than water's arrival, had begun. What is most remarkable is this: water did not create life. It simply allowed life to happen, like a perfect room, not too hot, not too cold, not too still, not too turbulent. A cradle suspended between the extremes of the universe, a brief hush where the smallest things could slowly learn to become something greater. And as the ocean settled into its own listening, those tiny movements grew more distinct, more steady, like the faint chest rise of a creature still asleep. A first breath not yet formed, but powerful enough to change the entire planet. That is why water has always brought humans a sense of safety. It carries the memory of every beginning. In the darkness of the primordial sea, between silent stone and dim firelight, those drifting particles were preparing something unseen, unheard, yet so powerful that it would turn a nameless rock into the home of millions of species. And as the water began to tremble as though waiting for its cue, the planet stood on the verge of witnessing a moment no other world had ever known. The moment when drops of water learned to think. When Earth's first oceans still carried a dark shade of blue, thick with minerals and warmed by the heat rising from the planet's core, the world looked like a place thinking in silence. Its surface held no footsteps, no rustling leaves, no insects calling into the air. There was only the steady, repetitive sound of waves, like the heartbeat of a colossal being not yet fully awake. That was the setting in which life, not life as we know it today, but in its most primitive, fragile form, began to take shape in the darkness of the deep sea. And what made that moment miraculous was not the complexity of its chemistry, but the strange simplicity of its conditions: warm water, minerals, and time. Just those three elements, working together in the quiet of millions of years, opened a completely new chapter for the entire planet. Imagine a place so deep that no light could reach it. There, the ocean floor was not entirely still. It simmered gently, like a pot just before boiling, as heat bubbled up constantly from hydrothermal vents. Hot, mineral-rich water mixed with the surrounding cold ocean, creating slow but continuous swirling currents. It was a dance unseen by any eye, yet enough to make molecules drift toward one another, bind, then drift apart as if testing themselves. From those slow movements, whether by accident or by some natural order, emerged the first structures capable of self-replication. They had no eyes, no hearts, no minds. But what made them extraordinary was the simplest and most wondrous ability any organism can have: the ability to copy itself. Once self-replication began, time changed its nature. Millions of years were no longer a meaningless flow. They became a catalyst. Those tiny units, through trial and error, through variation, through countless cycles of merging and separating, became more stable, more diverse. And like an invisible seed planted in the heart of the ocean, life began searching for ways to protect itself. This was not a sudden, radiant triumph. It was a story of quiet patience. Those early molecules did not know they were writing the first chapter of biology, nor did they know that billions of years later, humans would call them by names such as amino acids or protocells. For them, it may have been nothing more than drifting along with the currents, colliding with others, combining, and finding a structure that could last longer than a single wave. If there is anything miraculous in this story, it is this. Life was not created by violence, but by gentleness. It did not begin with an explosion, but with a droplet that happened to keep its warmth long enough. It did not begin with a dramatic event, but with the peculiar stability of water, a place where everything had enough time to try out infinite possibilities. When the self-replicating structures grew more stable, a new meaning of water began to reveal itself. Water was not merely the liquid that nourished life. Water was the place where life could rehearse, where it could fail, where it could begin again, where it could become something greater. In the darkness of the primordial ocean, each small change was a monumental step forward, though no one knew it. The clearest evidence of this miracle is that from an ocean once silent, without creatures, without seaweed, without any living sound, Earth slowly became a place of calls, of breaths, of movement. Those early oceans, once just a mixture of water and minerals, now carried something no other celestial body possessed, the ability to generate the memory of a species. But for life to grow from isolated particles into beings able to sense light, to swim, to reproduce, it required another condition, one that only water could provide: protection. Water embraced every early cell like a blanket laid over a newborn. It absorbed heat slowly, keeping the environment stable against wild climate shifts. It dissolved nutrients, sparing life from searching too far. It buoyed fragile structures, preventing them from being crushed under gravity. In water, even the weakest organisms had a chance to survive, to develop, to experiment with new forms. Without water, Earth might still have been beautiful, but it would never have carried life. And if we look deeply into this story, we find a familiar metaphor. Water is the planet's first memory. It records every movement, every failure, every success of those earliest structures. It carries the instincts of stars, the breath of the Earth's interior, and the rhythm of time, weaving them into a wordless song to which all living things would one day move. As the primordial ocean continued its gentle oscillations, life grew stronger. Single molecules became complex assemblies became cells, and then, in the chaos of billions of experiments, something unexpected occurred. Life not only replicated, but it also began to interact, to seek others, to join larger structures. A rudimentary awareness, not of individuals, but of the entire ocean, began to emerge. That is why many scientists have said that the ocean did not merely nourish life. The ocean was life. And when the ocean recognized its power, when its currents began to circulate across Earth's surface, carrying nutrients and its quiet breath into every corner, the planet entered a new chapter. A chapter in which water was not just a refuge, but a force shaping the atmosphere, the land, and the future of all species. For once, the drops that learned to think began to multiply. Water seemed to decide it did not want only to nurture life, it wanted to create an entire world capable of living. And in those very slow movements, another transformation was unfolding above the sea, where water was preparing to create something even more miraculous than life itself, a sky that could shelter everything. When the primordial ocean was still a dark shelter cradling the first cells of life, Earth was far from being a place one could truly live. Cosmic storms swept across its surface without pause. Ultraviolet rays pierced down like invisible blades, and the sky was not yet a soft blue veil, but a chaotic layer of gases, thin, unstable, and incapable of protecting the fragile life growing beneath the sea. Yet, within that imperfect world, another miracle began to form. This time, not from the ocean floor, but from the smallest beings quietly seeking a way to expand life's reach. The planet needed a breath, a shield, a gentle dome, and water, in a way only water could achieve, began to create it. Imagine the primordial sea floor when the earliest cells first learned to live in colonies. Many had no defined shape, no senses, no awareness of day or night. But in the shallower waters, where faint light could penetrate, a small group of tiny organisms began doing something no one could have predicted. They learned to draw sunlight into themselves. These organisms, later known as cyanobacteria, were no taller than a speck of dust, yet they carried within them the ability to change the destiny of a planet. They could turn light into energy, water into nourishment, and, unintentionally, they produced oxygen. No one witnessed that first moment, but one can imagine an ancient morning when a patch of water suddenly released a few delicate bubbles rising to the surface like fragile whispers. At first, those bubbles meant nothing, but over time they multiplied and multiplied until they reshaped the entire sky. Oxygen, the gas we now call breath, was a double-edged sword. For early life, it was poison. But for Earth, it was the one essential condition for becoming a truly habitable world. In those days, the oceans acted like immense lungs. They did not merely cradle life, they exhaled it slowly, building the atmosphere. Water evaporated, condensed, returned as rain-carrying minerals, and the tiny organisms kept releasing oxygen, gradually transforming the sky. Those gas molecules had no scent, no color, no sound, yet they were quietly creating a future for millions of species. If we listen with imagination, we might hear a faint rhythm, the rhythm of the planet's breath. A breath for which water was both the source and the keeper of time. And then, after hundreds of millions of years, something extraordinary occurred. Earth's atmosphere became thick enough to shield its surface from harsh cosmic radiation, rich enough in oxygen for new organisms to attempt more complex shapes, and stable enough that the climate no longer swung in unpredictable chaos. There were no fireworks marking this transformation, but if seen from afar, Earth might have appeared like a lamp that had just been turned brighter. A gentle shade of blue spread across the planet, signaling that life was no longer confined to the sea. It was preparing to reach toward land. But before that could happen, the ocean continued its monumental work, regulating temperature, holding the atmosphere in place, nourishing organisms, and connecting all of Earth's cycles. Water, with its inherent softness, never created life through violence. What it created, it nurtured. What it nurtured, it protected. Water always served as the foundation, silent, but irreplaceable. It is in this era that we begin to see a profound truth. Life was not the only thing evolving. Earth was evolving with it. Every thread of oxygen spun by cyanobacteria was like a reply the planet sent to the universe, that it was preparing to become a home for countless forms of life. And as the atmosphere stabilized, as sunlight softened, as water and wind joined into a balanced cycle, a new chapter opened, one in which water not only shaped the sky, but began shaping the land. For at this moment, the first rivers, narrow, young, but persistent, began their journey away from the ocean, seeking new stories. Their flow was still weak, yet carried an infinite ambition, the ambition to create fertile soil, to carve out continents, to prepare a place where life could one day rise from the water and stand upright. These rivers were not yet civilized, but they were the promise of civilization. They were not yet the voice of humankind, but they were the first whisper of the terrestrial world. And within that quiet whisper of flowing water, something felt like a calling, that water's journey was far from over. It would break mountains, carve valleys, inscribe its name upon every layer of soil, every grain of sand. For once, the ocean had created the planet's first breath, and water was preparing for its next mission, to shape the very home of life itself. As the atmosphere gradually softened, and the oceans learned how to breathe evenly, Earth entered a new phase, no longer just a planet of water, but the beginning of a planet of land, of continents, of dry ground capable of receiving the first steps of life. Yet the irony is striking. It was water, the softest of all things, that shaped the vast landmasses we often imagine to be eternal. If you look at a great boulder at the edge of the sea, it appears unshakably solid. But if you were to sit long enough, longer than a human lifetime, longer than a civilization, longer than the maps we draw of the world, you would see a slow, unmistakable truth. Water never argues with stone. It simply persists, passing over it, touching it, repeating. And time always takes water's side. At the boundary where waves meet rock, where waves crash day after day, century after century, there exists a kind of silence that is difficult to name. In sound, it is a constant roar. In essence, it is a process of patience so deep it borders on meditation, water eroding, pulling back, stone cracking, breaking, sand being born from the very spine of mountains, grain by grain. Mountains do not fall in a day, continents do not rise in a century. All of it is the result of an endless dialogue between two seeming opposites, the hardness of stone and the softness of water. From the young peaks of mountains, rain falls and gathers into streams thin as thread. The streams join into rivers. Rivers grow, winding and cutting into the earth, carving deep valleys, gorges, and vast plains. Each time water carries away a particle of earth, it does two things at once: destruction and creation. It destroys the old shape of mountains, but at the same time creates fertile soil elsewhere, where the drifting grains choose to rest. It is a beautiful paradox. Water lowers mountains so that plains may rise. This cycle repeats tirelessly. Rain falls from the sky, slips through cracks in rock, and gathers the smallest fragments. When water slows in lowlands, it releases what it has carried. Thus, floodplains are born, soft, nutrient-rich stretches of earth, ready for anything that seeks to take root. Later, these would be places where rice grew, cities rose, and humans lit their first fires beside the water. But at this stage of the planet, it was all only silent preparation. Not only rain and rivers, glaciers too, are another form of water participating in the sculpting of continents. During colder eras, water wore a new face. Colossal blocks of ice before which even mountains had to yield. They slid slowly across the land, grinding rock like massive blades, carving valleys, lakes, fjords. When the planet warmed, the ice melted, leaving behind scars across the continents. The very formations we later named so poetically, U-shaped valleys, glacial lakes, fjords. Even the coastline, the line we see on maps as something fixed, has never been permanent. During glacial periods, the sea retreated, continents expanded, and future humans would one day walk across regions now swallowed by waves. When the ice melted, the sea advanced, flooding deep into the land, forming bays, estuaries, and mangrove forests. The advance and retreat of the sea, another breath of water, slower than waves, but far more powerful. Viewed as a whole, the process resembles a symphony. Water is the lead musician, sometimes the rapid percussion of storms, sometimes the long flute notes of rivers, sometimes the deep, nearly inaudible hum of glaciers moving over mountains. The continents are the stage. Water is the choreographer, shaping every curve, every rise and fall, every path in and out. In history, we often speak of places as if they are fixed: Eurasia, Africa, the Americas. But from the water's perspective, these are merely temporary states of land. There are no rigid borders, only regions being eroded or rebuilt. Even the tallest mountain ranges are temporary pulses of Earth's crust, and water, with its endless patience, takes on the duty of returning them to modest heights. Perhaps that is why so many ancient cultures viewed water as the element of transformation. It does not merely cleanse or nourish. It reminds us that nothing truly stands still. What appears most solid, rock cliff mountain, is already on its quiet journey toward becoming sand, mud, silt. And from sediment, something new arises, the ability for continents to become abundant places for life. Fertile soil does not appear on its own. It is the result of millions of years of water repeating a simple gesture, carrying away and giving back. From afar, the process looks purely geological. But look closely, and you see water doing something humanity would eventually try to imitate: planning. Water outlined the continents long before humans conceived of maps. Where water slowed, settled, and deposited, these were the places where crops would later thrive, livestock would graze, and humans would find reasons to remain. This is why a river is not merely a product of a continent. It is its soul. Each river, leaving the mountains and flowing toward the sea, draws a soft line across the land, dividing yet also connecting. Physically, a river is simply water moving from high to low. Historically, a river is the first sketch for what would become roads, trade routes, networks of language and culture. Before pyramids, before city walls, before laws, before writing, there were rivers. And long before those rivers became the lifelines of civilizations, water had already perfected the stage, carving basins, hollowing valleys, shaping depressions deep enough for water to gather and linger. Listen long enough, and you will realize. In the silence between waves and rock, water is drafting a blueprint meant for humanity. Everything that came later, the fields along the Nile, the cities beside the Euphrates, the terraces in the yellow river basin, all are continuations of that early blueprint. And in places where water decided to linger just a little longer, flow a little slower, offer a little more silt, history would later record, those were where the first villages appeared, then grew into towns, into nations, into empires. For even after shaping the continents, water had not finished its mission. It still had one more task, a greater one, guiding the rivers into the history of humankind. When water had completed its long labor of shaping the continents, when mountains had been lowered, plains opened, and the land became softer and richer, it began its next mission, guiding humanity to the places where they could finally settle. And water did not choose the ocean as humanity's beginning, but the river, those soft ribbons woven through the earth, at once wild and gentle, destructive and nourishing. In a way, the river is the most refined form of water, not the vast, unpredictable immensity of the sea, nor the misty stillness of lakes. A river is purposeful. It carries the memory of mountains, the whisper of rain, the scent of new soil, and the hope of all the places it will pass. Wherever there is a river, there is rhythm. The rhythm of flood and drought, of silt and harvest, of settling and migration. And within this rhythm, humanity's earliest civilizations found their breath. Imagine a morning in antiquity when the sun first touched the surface of the Nile. In the thin mist, the river drifted slowly as if considering each decision. The Nile was not merely a source of water, it was the parent, teacher, and heartbeat of an entire world. When the river rose, the land was nourished. When it receded, fields emerged, dark, fertile, and so abundant that humans needed only to scatter a few seeds for life to spring forth. This is why ancient Egyptians did not see the Nile as a resource. They saw it as a god, a being with spirit, temperament, and cycles that required listening. Each flood was a stanza. Each dry season was a reminder. Prepare. In this way, water not only sustained them, but also taught them how to predict, record, and manage. Writing systems, calendars, and even early notions of social order arose from watching the river breathe. To the east, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, another story unfolded. These rivers were not as gentle as the Nile. When pleased, they brought silt. When angry, they swept away entire villages. Yet this unpredictability forced the people of Mesopotamia to organize, to build dikes, dig canals, and expand irrigation systems. From this, power emerged. Those who controlled water produced food. Those who produced food became rulers. Thus, cities, laws, and states were born from a simple question: how do we negotiate with the river? Leaving Mesopotamia, we arrive at the Indus Valley. Ancient cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa rose beside its quiet waters. There, people built drainage systems so sophisticated that many modern nations still study them. No empire from this region is remembered through loud epics or heroic legends, yet the enduring stability of the Indus civilization proves that water, even in silence, can create societies that are orderly, clean, and remarkably efficient. Farther east lay the Yellow River, known as China's Sorrow. Each flood altered its course, enriching some lands while destroying others. But this very uncertainty shaped the people's ability to adapt, a spirit that later formed the foundation of Eastern philosophy: harmony with nature, the ability to follow the current rather than resist it. Across all great early civilizations, a profound truth emerges. Humanity did not choose the rivers chose humanity. Water gave them land, but also social structure, a philosophy of life, and the constraints within which they were compelled to innovate. Along the Nile, water taught patience. In Mesopotamia, it taught engineering and power. In the Indus Valley, it taught sanitation and communal order. Along the Yellow River, it taught resilience. Without these lessons, human history would lack the stories we now call civilization. But water not only nourishes, it also tested. When rivers provided abundant food, people expanded farmland. When rivers became pathways, trade emerged. And when trade emerged, wealth, power, ambition took root. The earliest human conflicts were not for gold or land, but for water. Disputes over irrigation, ownership of dikes, and the most fertile soils along the riverbanks. Within this flow, the river became a test. Whoever could command the water became the one who wrote history. Viewed through the soothing lens of history, we might say that water raised humanity the way a mother raises her first child, nurturing and challenging, teaching and allowing them to grow through their own mistakes. And in every civilization, water leaves its imprint, not only in the fields and canals, but in the way people tell their stories about themselves and the places they come from. The rise of civilization is not the story of land or sky. It is the story of water. And as water drew people in, created communities, and laid the conditions for society to flourish, it also opened another door, a door to the quiet but persistent struggles that were to come. For when a gift becomes too precious, sooner or later, someone will try to claim it. And within those young civilizations, the first tremors began, conflicts that no river, however gentle, could prevent. When the first rivers brought silt to nourish the fields, when cities rose along their banks and civilizations began to discover their own rhythms, water seemed to be playing the role of a gentle mother, sheltering, nurturing, guiding. But beneath these serene stories, another truth was quietly forming, a more complex, darker truth. Wherever there is water, there will be power, and wherever there is power, there will be conflict. Humanity's earliest wars were not fought for gold, not for vast territories, not for abstract ideologies. They began with things far simpler: a riverbank, a dam, an irrigation canal, a season when the water failed to arrive. In Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates pulsed like twin lifelines, disputes erupted constantly among the Sumerian city-states, not because they sought to expand territory, but because they needed water to flow in the right direction, at the right time, in the right volume. A dam opened a few days late, a canal diverted without notice. Such things could cause crop failures across entire regions, and famine in the ancient world meant death. Thus, wars over water were not merely wars, they were battles for survival. In Lagash and Umma, one of the oldest recorded conflicts in human history, began over a small piece of land within a shared irrigation system. The land was not vast, but whoever controlled it controlled the water that passed through it, and so small armies, armed with bronze and wood, marched to determine whether the water would turn left or right. These seemingly primitive struggles became the prototypes of all future resource wars. Whoever controls the supply determines the fate of others. If we leave Mesopotamia for Egypt, we find a different story of water, but the same ending. The Nile was gentle, yes, but its gentleness created almost total dependency. If the Nile failed to rise on schedule, the foundation of society trembled. Pharaohs understood this well. They built colossal hydraulic systems not only to manage water, but to manage loyalty. Water thus became an instrument of governance, a soft power more effective than any army. Far to the south, in Nubia, where the Nile squeezed through narrow gorges, local tribes used the terrain to manipulate the river's flow and apply political pressure on Egypt. These tensions lasted for centuries, not for visible land, but for control over the open and closed gates of the river. In ancient China, the story grew even more brutal. The Yellow River, considered the cradle of Chinese civilization, was also the source of countless internal conflicts. In the spring and autumn and warring states periods, feudal lords expanded irrigation canals to feed their fields or withheld water to punish rivals. Humans, unintentionally, turned water into a weapon. Dams were destroyed, dikes were breached, river courses were rerouted to drown enemy armies. The very substance that had once nourished humanity had become its coldest blade. The most unsettling part is this: wars over water were not loud. No legendary battles, no fiery skies, no generals whose names entered epic poetry. They unfolded in silence, on the maps of soil and water, in tense negotiations, in dividing a narrow canal or determining the boundary of a rice field. Yet their consequences shaped the survival of entire civilizations. Looking back, we can see these conflicts as pivotal turning points in human history. They forced humans to learn large-scale cooperation. They gave rise to laws governing land and water. They birthed the earliest structures of state power, those who could allocate resources. They shaped cultural character. Egypt learned respect for natural cycles. Mesopotamia learned to build power through engineering. China learned the balance between control and harmonizing with nature. In this way, water did not merely create war, it created politics, it created society, it created the very concept of power. Yet the most remarkable feature of ancient water conflicts is this: they introduced the idea that the world is connected not only by land, but by flow. One may block a road, but blocking a river is far harder. One may conquer a city, but not an entire flood cycle. And thus, the first pathways humanity used to expand its world were not roads, but waterways. From the need to protect water, humans began following water. They built boats. They learned to read the sky and the wind. They explored where the currents led, and from narrow rivers, their gaze stretched toward wider waters, deeper seas. One day, standing before the vast ocean, humans realized a simple truth: if rivers bring life, the sea brings the world. And from that moment, water began a new chapter in human history, a chapter of expansion, commerce, distant voyages, and civilizations brave enough to let the wind carry them beyond familiar shores. For even as the wars over water had not yet ended, water was already preparing a greater road for humankind, the road that would carry them into the open ocean. When the rivers grew too narrow for humanity's expanding ambitions, when people began to understand that water not only nourished but could open new doors, they started to look farther, to where the horizon met the sea with a thin silver line. That was when the ocean, long silent like a still deity, began whispering to humanity about a world larger, wider, and far more challenging. If the river was where humans learned to live together, then the sea was where they learned to face the infinite. No one knows the exact moment when someone first placed a piece of wood on the water and thought it might carry them afar. But surely that morning must have been quiet. The water was still, the breeze held a faint taste of salt, and before them stretched an ocean without words. The first wooden boat was not a masterpiece, but it was a sign that humans had begun to believe they could negotiate with the sea. Gradually, dugout canoes were joined into rafts. Rafts grew sturdier. People learned to tie ropes to catch the wind, to read the sun for direction. From these small experiments over waves, a new way of thinking emerged. The world no longer ended at the river looping around their village, but extended as far as the wind carried the scent of distant lands. Phoenicia became one of the first civilizations to turn the ocean into its road. The merchants of the eastern Mediterranean possessed neither vast territories nor endless farmland, nor large deserts to pasture herds. But they had the sea. And more importantly, they understood it the way farmers understood soil. They knew the seasons of wind, the direction of currents, the way a ship should embrace a wave or avoid it. Thus, they built trade routes stretching thousands of kilometers, connecting cities, cultures, and systems of writing. Their voyages did not carry only timber, glass, wine, or ornaments. They carried ideas, techniques, and new ways of storytelling. Each time a ship returned to its old harbor, the world expanded slightly, as if the sea itself had stretched the imagination of humankind. The Greeks and later the Romans continued this journey. For them, the sea was not merely a trade route, but a mirror reflecting human ambition. The farther the ship sailed, the greater those ambitions grew. Roman fleets cut through the waves to build what they called Mare Nostrum, our sea. A bold declaration, yet trembling beneath its pride, was an understanding. The sea might allow greatness, but it never belonged to anyone. Behind those imperial dreams, water continued its quiet work, connecting. It carried wheat from Egypt to Rome. It carried Greek philosophy to the eastern Mediterranean. It carried Phoenician glass to the west. It carried religions, languages, and human stories across distances they had never dared to cross before. What makes the ocean extraordinary is not only its depth or breadth or danger. It is the fact that it is the one realm of water humans cannot possess. Rivers can be dammed. Lakes can be controlled. But the sea remains open, boundless, and that boundlessness created a freedom that empires longed for and feared. It is almost ironic that to build the greatest empires, humans first had to learn humility. Before storms they could not defeat, before reefs they could not see, before winds they could only predict but never command. The ocean did not merely open pathways for expansion, it taught a crucial lesson. Power is never absolute, yet no matter how vast or free the ocean appeared, it carried another face, one ancient civilizations feared deeply. For the sea was not only a highway for merchants, it was also a highway for storms, for furious tides, for tsunamis that approached in silence like nightfall, for forces far beyond human calculation. And here, the ocean revealed a nature the rivers never had. It nourished with one hand and could take everything with the other in an instant. Looking back at the journey from wooden rafts to mighty fleets, from humble merchants to civilizations that dared to claim entire seas, we understand that water was never simply a foundation for trade or expansion. It was a test of humility, a lesson about limits, a reminder that power always walks alongside risk. And the farther humans ventured into the ocean, the more they realized that behind its endless beauty lay colossal upheavals, disasters no empire, however mighty, could fully withstand. Seafaring expanded the world, but the sea also whispered, "This world is more fragile than you think." And when the color of the water shifted, when distant waves rose like an angry breath, humanity understood that water's journey was not only an opportunity, but a challenge named disaster. Throughout the long arc of human history, Water has played the role of a gentle teacher, showing humanity how to plant, how to build, how to expand, and how to explore. But like every force of nature, water never possessed just one temperament. Its softness could be the beginning of life, yet within that very softness lay a power capable of redefining entire civilizations. If rivers brought fertility, floods could sweep everything away in a single night. If the sea enabled trade, tsunamis could erase cities humans believed were as ancient as history itself. And if rain was a gift, drought was a reminder that water never truly belonged to anyone. In ancient stories, water was often described as a deity with two faces. One face carried green fields, grain, and peaceful life. The other, when angered, was the fury of heaven and earth. The striking thing is, both faces were real, and both existed within the same water we drink every day. Let us begin with floods, the phenomenon ancient humanity feared and revered in equal measure. In China, the floods of the Yellow River were heavy strokes on the canvas of time. The ancients said the river, called the shame of China, not only nourished the land but frequently changed its course, as if testing humanity's ability to adapt. A season of violent rising waters could sweep away entire villages, leaving tens of thousands without shelter. And yet that same river, once it calmed, left behind fine golden silt, the very substance from which an empire was fed. People standing before the Yellow River had to ask themselves, is this a gift or a warning? And the answer, as with all things involving water, was never simple. In ancient Mesopotamia, Sumerian cities witnessed floods strong enough to destroy even their most fortified structures. Walls that seemed unshakable crumbled instantly under unfamiliar waters. Each flood redrew the map of history. The places that survived became centers of power. The places submerged disappeared from memory. All of this reminds us of one truth. Water has a memory. It remembers its ancient paths, and sometimes it returns to them, no matter what humans have built there. If floods are water in excess, drought is water in absence, and sometimes absence is even more cruel than excess. Imagine the lands of ancient Canaan or Syria, where every drop of rain meant survival. When the sky stayed silent for months, people felt a different kind of fear, the fear of cracked earth, of empty wells, of pastures turning to dust, of livestock collapsing one by one. Drought did not arrive suddenly. It arrived slowly, painfully, layer by layer, and it offered no opponent one could fight. Humans could only wait. Many ancient civilizations collapsed not because of war, but because the sky no longer answered their pleas. A delayed rainy season, a shift in climate, and a once thriving city could become a barren desert within decades. This was not punishment, but simply a missing note in the great symphony of water. And tsunamis, the most violent face of water, appeared rarely, but each appearance left a scar on history. Our ancestors told stories of water columns tall as mountains, racing inland so fast that no one understood what was happening. Ancient coastal civilizations, from the Aegean to South Asia, all preserved memories of a day when the sea retreated unnaturally, only to return with a force beyond comprehension. These stories were not exaggerations. They were collective memories of a power humanity could only witness. Tsunamis did not discriminate between great cities and small villages. They cared nothing for technology, morality, or power. They were simply sudden movements of Earth's crust, but their force reminded humanity that water could return to its primal nature, the nature of chaos. Yet looking deeper into these disasters, we see that water was never angry. It did not intend to punish. It did not choose sides. It merely followed the rules nature had given it from the beginning, to move, to balance, to create new cycles. Floods erased old land to create new soil. Drought forced people to migrate, reorganize, and learn to store resources. Tsunamis reshaped coastlines, opening new ecological spaces. All were shifts in the planet's design, strokes of a brush that were sometimes too bold for humanity to bear. Seen from a broader view, a poetic paradox emerges. Only the thing that nurtures us most can also bring the deepest fear. Because when humans understood they lived by water, they also understood they could never fully control it. And this helplessness created a dual attitude, reverence and caution, gratitude and anxiety. But water did more than challenge humanity. In the darkness of these disasters, it offered a new idea, that if people cooperated, built structures, organized, shared, and coordinated, they could withstand the forces of nature. And this realization led humanity to one of its greatest turning points. The creation of empires was built on the mastery of water. After experiencing enough floods to know their devastation, enough droughts to feel the value of every drop, and enough waves to understand human fragility, humans began wanting something their ancestors had never conceived: to control water. And so, across valleys and plains, appeared structures that commanded the awe of history: walls that held back floods, canals that guided water, cities sustained by hydraulic engineering. This was the moment when water became not only a force of destruction, but the foundation of power. And when humanity learned to shape the flow according to its will, history entered a new chapter, the chapter of empires built by water. After centuries of living in fear of floods, droughts, and tsunamis, after understanding clearly that water could both nourish and destroy, humanity began to nurture a bold ambition, not merely to live alongside water, but to command it. This was a quiet yet revolutionary turning point in history. From praying to rivers, humans gradually shifted to redrawing their paths. And whenever we look at the greatest empires in history, we find the same common denominator. They were not only powerful on the battlefield, they were masters of water. Rome is a perfect example of a civilization that understood this truth. To rule a vast territory, one must first rule its water. Imagine an ancient morning on the outskirts of Rome, the sun not yet fully risen, yet water already trickling from rooftops and fountains. That water did not come from village wells, but from structures stretching across valleys and over hills, the famous Roman aqueducts. From springs and reservoirs located tens, even hundreds of kilometers away, Romans guided water into the city using stone channels, arches, and underground pipes, calibrated with astounding precision. No pumps, no engines, only gravity and ingenuity. Yet through this, they provided clean water for hundreds of thousands of residents, for public baths, for fountains, for the gardens of nobles. In Rome, water was not merely a necessity. It was a symbol. A fountain in the square was not simply a place to drink. It was a reminder that this empire could pull water from mountains to the city's doorstep and let it flow freely as a display of power. An empire that mastered water, something belonging to nature alone, was an empire that mastered its own future. Within those channels, we see not only engineering but a philosophy of governance. Whoever controlled the water infrastructure controlled the quality of life, and whoever controlled the quality of life held loyalty. In the East, the story takes on a different tone, but ends the same way. Ancient China, especially from the Qin and Han dynasties onward, regarded hydraulic engineering as the backbone of the state. The long dikes that shielded the Yellow River plains from devastating floods, the diversion works, the vast system of canals, none were isolated projects, but parts of a national vision. One of the most quietly magnificent feats was the Grand Canal, the waterway linking northern and southern China, stretching thousands of kilometers. It allowed grain from the fertile Jiangnan region to reach the northern capital. It moved armies, it carried information, taxes, and decrees. Upon its calm surface glided thousands of boats, each one carrying the breath of the empire. If Roman aqueducts were rivers raised into the sky, Chinese canals were rivers carved by human hands into the earth. Both proclaimed the same truth: land belongs to an empire only when its water belongs to that empire. The dikes of China told a similar story. People of Tea. The Yellow River knew each flood season was an examination. If the dike held, the year was prosperous. If it broke, the year was filled with mourning. Thus, hydraulic works were not merely technical concerns. They were measures of political legitimacy. A dynasty that allowed repeated dike failures lost the mandate of heaven in the eyes of its people. Farther south, amid the forests of Southeast Asia, Angkor rose like a dream of stone in a sea of water. To most, Angkor is a field of lotus-like towers rising toward the sky. But behind that grandeur lay a hydraulic system so sophisticated it borders on the surreal. Vast reservoirs, barrages, channels, ponds, and moats align not only with cosmology and religion, but with the very practical need to regulate water for agriculture. Cambodia's climate, sharply divided into wet and dry seasons, meant water was sometimes too abundant, sometimes too scarce. Angkor solved this by turning its entire landscape into a gigantic water machine, storing water in the monsoon season, redistributing it in the dry months. As a result, the kingdom supported a massive population, produced immense rice surpluses, and from that surplus built temples that endured for centuries. Seen from above, Angkor looks like a blueprint of flowing water, every main axis leading to reservoirs, every temple intertwined with canals and ponds, as if water was not only a necessity, but a sacred material from which the empire carved its meditative architecture. Across these three stories, Rome, China, Angkor, an important conclusion emerges. The great empires of history were not merely land empires or military empires, but water empires. They did not only expand borders, they reached into riverbeds, aquifers, reservoirs, and canals. They understood that humans could endure hunger for knowledge or scarcity of gold, but never a day without water. From this perspective, hydraulic works became the nervous system of the state. Where water flowed, life followed. Where water was controlled, power was secured. Where water was cut off, rebellion began. Even more fascinating is how these systems revealed the limits of empires. When Rome weakened, aqueducts fell into disrepair, cities lost clean water, and disease spread. When Chinese dynasties could no longer maintain their dikes, floods and famine sparked uprisings. When Angkor's water system deteriorated due to climate shifts, war, or mismanagement, the center of power slowly emptied and the forest reclaimed what remained. Water, in this way, was both foundation and silent examiner of every dynasty. Yet for all their greatness, these hydraulic wonders relied on unchanging natural laws. Water flowed from high to low, from full to empty. Humans could guide it, block it, divide it, gather it, but not command it to behave against nature. Then came an age when human ambition took another step forward, not only to control the qi movement of water, but to turn water into a source of power. This was the moment humans no longer saw rivers merely as irrigation, but as energy. They no longer saw waterfalls as scenery, but as a force to turn wheels. They no longer used water only to grow rice, but to run machines. And from the slow-turning water wheels by mountain streams to the hissing boilers of factories, water stepped into an entirely new role, not merely the creator of empires, but the creator of an entire era, the era of machines. For tens of thousands of years, water acted as a natural force, flowing along mountains, carrying silt, nurturing fields, pushing boats downstream. It was the mother of continents, the teacher of civilization, the companion of humanity through every age. But in the 18th century, something unprecedented happened. Humans began seeking not only to channel water, not only to control it, but to turn water into energy. If once water had been a foundation, now water has become a motor. And this marked the beginning of humanity's greatest transformation, the Industrial Revolution. Imagine water in a new form, not as a flowing river, not as falling rain, not as the swelling sea, but confined inside an iron pot, heated until it no longer remembered it was water at all. As water boiled, steam rose, and within that expansion lay a vast energy that humans had long observed, yet allowed to dissipate. But now they began to understand. Steam was Earth's hidden source of power. The pioneers of this discovery were not empires, but inventors, people who looked at rivers and thought not of crops, who looked at waterfalls and thought not of scenery, but who looked at water and thought of motion. James Watt, Thomas Newcomen, Denis Papin, each contributed something to what the world would later call the steam engine. For the first time in history, humans could make water, work for them in a deliberate, controlled way. No more dependence on wind, no more waiting on natural currents, no more reliance on the rhythms of rain and drought. Just light a fire, and water becomes a laborer. And so, the world changed. The first steam engines echoed in the mines of England, where humans constantly pumped out water to extract coal. Steam, in its new role, drove iron arms, turned wheels, and kept tunnels dry. This small detail, water helping humans escape water, became the opening line of a new historical chapter. From the mines, steam moved to factories, from factories to railways, from railways to steamships, and from steamships to the entire world. If rivers once opened pathways for ancient empires, then steam opened pathways for a completely different empire, the empire of speed. Iron wheels began to roll, ships no longer need wind, looms moved hundreds of times faster than human hands. Everything, trade, transport, production, even warfare, was transformed. Amid the noise of that age, one faint yet familiar sound could still be heard, the soft hiss of escaping steam, like the breath of a metallic creature. It was the breath of a new world, a world where humanity realized it could generate energy from the very water that had raised it since the dawn of time. But like every technological leap, steam came with a price. The rapid growth of factories demanded immense fuel. Coal burned, wood burned, oil burned. The sky began to change color. Rivers, once clear, turned murky. The land around coal mines grew barren. Natural landscapes, shaped by water's patient hand over millions of years, were altered by humans in mere decades. Humanity had never been so powerful, but water had never been so vulnerable. If once water had been a force of nature, it now became a victim of the very progress it had helped create. From rivers flowing through industrial cities, strange phenomena appeared: dead fish, foul odors, foaming surfaces, and water turning unnatural colors. For the first time in history, humans created a kind of water that nature could not cleanse, polluted water. And this was when humanity began to grasp a profound rule. That which grants the greatest power demands the greatest responsibility. Water had helped humans build civilization. Steam had helped humans enter the age of machines. But now polluted water knocked on the door, reminding them, every advancement carries a cost. The Industrial Revolution was the moment water spoke to humanity in a completely new voice. Not the whisper of rivers, not the roar of floods, but the metallic cry of machines. And in that voice was a message. If you want to go faster, stronger, farther, you must know what water needs. No longer was this an era where water merely needed to be diverted, stored, or distributed. This was an era where water needed protection. For if water ran out or became poisoned, even the mightiest engines would be meaningless. The world now stood at a crossroads. On one side, unprecedented progress. On the other hand, environmental decline was created by that very progress. And through the smoke of factories and the murky waters flowing to the sea, A soft warning could be heard, sharp enough to make humanity reflect. Every revolution has a shadow, yet water has never worn only the shape of warning. Even altered, exploited, or harmed, water retains one vital quality: the ability to renew itself. A single rain could cleanse the dustiest sky. A single river could recover if given proper care. A polluted lake could return to life if humans chose to change. And it was this belief, the belief that water could still be saved, that carried the world into the next chapter of history, the chapter of environmental awareness, the chapter in which humans first asked, "What have we done to water?" That question opened a new era, darker, heavier, but necessary. An era in which water was no longer merely a victim of industry, but the center of global crises. And as rivers began to stink, oceans changed color, and rain itself grew uncertain, the world understood. We were entering the age in which water would reveal both its faces, the face of life and the face of consequence. For millions of years, water functioned as a perfect cycle, falling from clouds, flowing across stone, filtering through sand, passing through roots, then returning to the sky to begin its journey anew. This cycle was so refined that it required no human intervention. It unfolded according to an ancient rhythm, steady, patient, like the breath of the earth. But when the Industrial Revolution arrived, that rhythm was broken, not in a single moment, but through relentless accumulation. One more factory, one more mine, one more wastewater outlet, one more expanding city, and ever more demands that humanity assumed the earth could absorb indefinitely. And then one day, humankind realized that the water they had once believed to be infinite had begun to change color. Polluted water is not as dramatic as a tsunami. It does not rush in like a flood. It does not evoke immediate panic. It is a danger born from slowness, a river fading gradually from blue to gray, and no one remembers when the change began. A village pond that suddenly emits an unpleasant smell, yet because people still rely on it, no one questions it. An aquifer accumulating heavy metals, unseen, silent, moving through darkness. This is the other face of blue gold, when the blue no longer shines clear but becomes a cloudy mirror reflecting the failings of modern civilization. In the early decades of industrialization, everything was justified by the word progress. Factories needed water for cooling, cities needed wastewater to carry refuse away. Agriculture needed chemical fertilizers and pesticides. The plastics industry, textile mills, metal refineries, all of them borrowed water, then returned to the rivers a version of themselves that was exhausted, burdened, and devoid of life. If we could listen, perhaps we would hear the rivers sigh. Rivers that once nourished civilizations now carry the consequences of those civilizations. Across many 19th century European industrial zones, inky black channels flowed toward the sea, loaded with chemicals that nature could not break down. At night, the water shimmered purple, red, green, reflections not of sunsets but of dyes dumped straight into the river. In rapidly growing cities, overloaded drainage systems push wastewater into lakes. Communities along riverbanks lived beside trash, unfamiliar odors, and bacteria unseen by the eye but deeply felt by the body. And worse still were the things invisible even to that: microplastics, heavy metals, toxins accumulating in every drop. They did not cause immediate catastrophe. They slipped quietly into soil, food, and human bodies, little by little. But polluted water is not merely a story of health or environment. It is a story of imbalance. When humans cut forests, paved the earth, built dams, and diverted rivers, they altered the way water moved. Many rivers, once wide and strong, shrank into narrow threads. Lakes dried, wetlands disappeared, groundwater is longer replenished fast enough. Nature once possessed the ability to heal itself. But when pressure surpassed its threshold, that mechanism failed. Dirty water did not harm only humans, it fractured entire ecosystems. Fish vanished from rivers, mangrove forests retreated, Coral reefs are bleached, everything connected like strings on a lute pulled too taut. When one snaps, the whole harmony falters. The saddest truth is that for a very long time, humanity did not treat this as a priority. Floods are visible. Drought is felt by all. Tsunamis leave unforgettable scars, but polluted water is quiet. It has no shocking image, no roaring sound, only daily degradation, which people slowly grow accustomed to, then accept. The world did not wait until the 20th century to notice the issue, but it was the 20th, and especially the 21st, that made painfully clear polluted water is not a side effect of development, but a global threat. The oceans, once considered nature's ultimate landfill, answered with alarming signs: floating garbage islands, mass fish die-offs, oxygen-deprived dead zones where almost no life could survive. And when the sea cried out, the world understood that the water cycle itself had been wounded. Yet even in these gray tones, small lights remained. Water always carries the ability to heal, if humans stop harming it. When nations tightened discharge regulations, rivers once considered dead came back to life. Salmon returned to places they had abandoned for hundreds of years. Oceans began to recover when fishing declined and waste was reduced. Mangrove forests were replanted, pulling back fragments of balance that had been lost. And there were the quiet warriors, scientists, environmentalists, engineers, farmers, who waged battles not for profit, not for power, but simply to protect each drop of water. A battle of hope in an age of loss. But polluted water raises a larger question. If a nation's water becomes contaminated, what happens to those who rely entirely on it? This is no longer only an environmental story. It is a geopolitical story, a story of survival for communities, cities, and nations. And that question opens the next chapter of our journey, an era in which water is not merely a resource, but it's a matter of security. An era in which polluted water not only reveals past mistakes, but warns of the crises to come. For when water no longer reflects the sky, but instead mirrors the wounds of humanity, the world understands that we are entering the age of water crises, an age in which every drop carries a question about the future. Some crises in history arrive with an explosion, wars, coups, and financial collapses, but there are also crises that arrive through silence. No gunfire, no armies, no storms, only days without rain. Rivers are sinking bit by bit, and no one remembers when it started. Faucets still squeak, but the last drop fell yesterday. The water crisis of the 20th and 21st centuries belongs to this silent kind. If we trace water's journey from the beginning of this series, we see a strange circle. In the beginning, water was the condition for life itself. Then, water nourished civilization, shaping rivers, fields, and empires. Then, water became energy, steam pushing the world into industrial motion. And now, in a paradoxical turn, that same civilization stands before an ancient question in a new form. Do we still have enough water to continue living as we do now? The 20th century was an age of expansion. Booming populations, sprawling cities, industrialized agriculture, factories, hydroelectric dams, and modern irrigation networks spreading across the map. On paper, humanity had never been so skilled at managing water. Massive dams, giant reservoirs, deep wells tapping aquifers, intricate canal systems. Yet within this seemingly controlled picture, the first cracks appeared. In some places, the threat wasn't flooding. It was days with no water. Not dry seasons in the traditional sense, but dry years, dry decades. Regions such as California, the American West, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, the Sahel of Africa, and major river basins across Asia began to experience longer, harsher drought cycles. Groundwater was overdrawn for agriculture in growing cities. Rivers failed to reach the sea during the dry season. Lakes shrank. revealing cracked earth no one had seen before. Scientific reports spoke in terms like water stress, water deficit, and aquifer depletion. But if you walked into distant villages, the language was far simpler. The well is dry. This season there isn't enough water for people or cattle. Half the rice has died in the field. Behind these words lie the most concrete decisions: stay or leave, sell or keep, continue or abandon. A water crisis at its most intimate level is always a crisis of daily life. There are stories the world now repeats as cautionary tales. A major city, seemingly safe, enters its day zero, the day the municipal water system is warned it may simply shut off. People queue for water as if queuing for wartime rations. Each household receives a strict limit, measured not by convenience but by liters. Water, once something summoned with a turn of the tap, suddenly reverts to its primal essence, something to be hurried for, stored, guarded. Elsewhere, drought not only dries wells, it fuels political tension. As the land cracks, people abandon villages and flood into cities. Pressure grows on jobs, housing, services, stability, spawning new waves of social unrest. We cannot always say wars over water in a simple sense, but we can clearly see water, or the lack of it, stands behind many regional crises and conflicts. Once again, water becomes a central figure in human history. But this time, it appears in the form of absence. What makes the water crisis of the 20th and 21st centuries especially severe is not only that there is less water, but that clean water is no longer distributed equitably. Somewhere on this planet, people use hundreds of liters just to wash cars, water lawns, cool data centers, and run factories. Elsewhere, families walk kilometers to fetch a few containers of murky water for boiling. Water inequality is not as visible as financial inequality. It does not appear in bank balances, but in the clarity of water in a bucket, in the distance to the nearest source, in whether you can open a tap at any hour or must queue at dawn. And when this inequality grows beyond a certain threshold, water takes on a new face, the face of power. Whoever controls the source can set the price, determine access, and shape the dependency of surrounding communities. Rivers crossing multiple nations become subjects of tense negotiations. Large dams become not just engineering projects, but political valves. Downstream nations feel every decision made upstream, sometimes merely through a slightly faster decline in water levels. From above, the planet looks like a lattice of water lines: rivers, lakes, dams, canals, irrigation grids, urban supply and drainage networks. But beneath that surface lies another network: tensions between agriculture and industry, between cities and rural areas, between nations sharing a watershed, between today's needs and tomorrow's safety. There is a bitter truth: humanity has never produced new water. We can move it, filter it, store it, reuse it, but we cannot create a new molecule of water for the planet. The quantity is fixed, only distribution changes. And within that reality, a new concept has emerged: water as an asset, a kind of blue gold. It is no longer merely a resource for survival. It becomes something to buy, sell, invest in, and calculate profit from. Private companies enter clean water provision. Licenses for water extraction are sold. Water futures markets appear. Water leaves the realm of clouds, rivers, and seas and enters balance sheets as a line of assets, a commodity code. Some say this increases efficiency, reduces waste, and funds infrastructure. But others ask, when water becomes a commodity, what happens to those too poor to buy it? When water sources fall into the hands of a few large entities, what rights do local communities retain over the river flowing through their village? And when blue gold enters financial markets, does the nature of water, as a basic condition for life, risk being distorted? The water crisis of the 20th and 21st centuries, then, is not merely a crisis of quantity, but a crisis of meaning. What is water in this world? A fundamental right? A public service? A commodity? A tool of power? Each answer leads to a different society, a different mode of governance, a different future. And amid all these debates, rivers continue to flow, rain continues to fall, vapor continues to rise, oceans continue to embrace the horizon. Nature maintains its ancient cycle. Only humanity, the species water has nurtured for millions of years, stands bewildered before its own reflection. Because if we look closely, we see. The water crisis is ultimately a crisis of how humans have used their power, their technology, and their ambition. Yet no matter how dark the painting becomes, there are strokes of hope. Communities self-managing their water, low-cost filtration projects, river and lake restoration policies, and movements to protect clean water for future generations. In these places, water is not blue gold to hoard, but a legacy to share. The question for the rest of the 21st century is, will blue gold be treated like gold or like water? Will it be gathered into the vaults of a few or preserved as a shared flow that all living beings have the right to touch? And that very question opens the door to the next chapter. The era in which water steps fully into the language of economics, finance, and power, and becomes the clearest mirror of nations' ambitions for the future. There is a very quiet moment in modern history, the moment when strategists, economists, and national security planners began speaking about water in the same language the 20th century once reserved for oil. No longer just a natural resource, no longer merely basic infrastructure, water began to be called something new, blue gold. The word gold here is not poetic ornamentation, it names a slow but irreversible truth. In a world of rising populations, increasingly extreme climates, expanding demands for food, energy, and industry, water, especially clean water, becomes the element that may determine the very shape of a nation's future. Not whoever has the most money will thrive, not whoever has the most weapons will prevail, but rather, who still has water, who can keep water, who can control water, those are the ones who have a future. Seen from space, Earth appears abundant in water. 70% ocean, vast polar ice, dense clouds, rivers braided across continents. But on the ground, the story is entirely different. Only a tiny fraction of all that water is fresh water suitable for use, and of that small fraction, only a smaller part is truly accessible. Meaning, what looks infinite to the eye is, in reality, severely limited. In the 21st century, nations began to realize that this limit was no longer theoretical. As reservoirs shrank, glaciers melted out of sync with their ancient rhythms. Groundwater levels fell, and river basins were carved apart by dams and canals. Water became a strategic asset, appearing in every planning map, every development blueprint, every security memorandum that once mentioned only armies, energy, and borders. One can imagine a closed meeting room where leaders no longer discuss gold or oil, but reservoir levels, river flows, groundwater rights. Dry numbers on paper, discharge, storage, capacity suddenly reveal themselves as the soft boundaries of power. And so, water slowly entered the language of the market. Major cities assigned a clean water supply to private corporations. Companies purchased rights to extract, manage, and operate water systems. On trading floors, futures contracts connected to water appeared, traded like wheat, gas, or metal. On one side, the arguments were clear and seemingly rational. Privatization reduces leakage and boosts efficiency. Market-based pricing discourages waste. Profit provides incentive for infrastructure investment. But on the other side, a sleepless question arose. What happens when water for living becomes a line of profit on a financial report? For a poor family, water is not a product. It is the condition of existence, drinking, cooking, bathing, growing a small garden. For a corporation, Water may simply be an input. The cheaper, the better. The more, the better. When these two perspectives collide, fierce debates emerge. Is water a fundamental right or a service, a shared resource or a commodity to be owned? The unknown answer each nation chooses will define its path for decades to come. Yet water's power lies not only in bills and contracts, but also in geography. Many of the world's great rivers do not belong to a single nation. They begin in one country's mountains, pass through another's fertile plains, and empty into the sea at a third country's delta. Along their journey, each nation has plans, dams, reservoirs, hydropower, irrigation, and water transfer schemes. Upstream, they say, this is our legitimate right to develop. Downstream, they say, this is our survival. Between these two claims, both saying ours, lies the entire depth of water geopolitics. It is no coincidence that negotiations over transboundary rivers often stretch for years, sometimes decades, shaped by delicate language. Behind every number on discharge lies a deeper question. Who grows rice? Who generates electricity? Who faces salinization? Who suffers from flooding? In the 21st century, water security is discussed alongside energy security and food security. For if a nation lacks clean water, all other development strategies become abstract. On the world map, new categories begin to appear. Countries rich in water, large rivers, abundant rainfall, thick aquifers. Countries poor in water, arid, desertifying, reliant on food imports because agriculture cannot be sustained. And a third, more troubling group, nations once rich in water, now losing it due to pollution, overuse, or mismanagement. One can imagine a near future where a nation's global status is measured not by GDP, military might, or diplomatic influence, but by simpler questions. Do they have enough water for their grandchildren? Are they completely dependent on external sources? Are they protecting water quality or trading it away for short-term growth? In this landscape, blue gold is not a mine to be exploited until empty, but an ability to maintain balance between growth and preservation, consumption and renewal, today's gains and tomorrow's needs. Alongside politics and economics, water also reflects the psychology of a nation. A society that wastes water, pollutes freely, and treats clean water as guaranteed is often a society accustomed to overspending in many other ways. Conversely, communities that cherish every drop reorganize their production, farming, and daily life around conservation, and are often communities that have learned the lesson of limits. Blue gold, when looked at deeply, is not merely a resource. It is a silent test of humanity's collective wisdom. Are we mature enough to treat water differently from how we treated oil? Or will we repeat the same cycle, extraction, competition, crisis, regret? But amid these heavy questions, there remain thin yet persistent strands of hope. Community-based water management models, shared water treaties among nations, technologies for saving, recycling, desalination, and leak detection, all show that humanity can write a different script, one in which water does not become a cause of conflict, but a catalyst for cooperation. To accomplish this, we must understand water on two levels: the surface level, economics, politics, governance, and the deeper level, the physical and chemical mysteries that make water unlike any substance in the universe. For without its peculiar properties, expanding when frozen, high heat capacity, strange hydrogen bonding, water could never have become the foundation of life, let alone the blue gold of nations. To understand how a transparent, colorless, scentless liquid can carry biology, geopolitics, and humanity's future across its surface, we must listen to water at its smallest scale, where each molecule whispers its strangest secrets. There are secrets so ancient that we begin to mistake them for obvious truths. Water, for example. We drink it every day, wash our hands in it, wade through it, watch the rain fall, listen to streams whisper against stone, and because of that familiarity, we often forget something profound. Water is a liquid that is anything but ordinary. In fact, compared with most liquids in the universe, water behaves like an eccentric outlier, breaking rules, defying logic, possessing quirks so strange that scientists must admit, if water were not odd in exactly the way it is, life as we know it could never have existed. Let us begin with the strangest property, the one that allows countless living creatures to survive winter. Water expands when it freezes. For most liquids, cooling causes molecules to draw closer together, making the substance contract and grow heavier. But water is different. Near its freezing point, its molecules rearrange themselves into a special lattice, creating more empty space. Ice, therefore, becomes lighter than liquid water and floats. You might think, so what? But imagine a world where ice sinks. Rivers and lakes would freeze from the bottom upward, trapping cold, killing every creature inside, and gradually turning oceans into solid blocks of ice over millions of years. Earth would become a frozen white planet, no life, no birdsong, no river-born civilizations. The strange truth is simple. Water is eccentric in precisely the way life needs. Here's the second oddity. Water holds heat in an unusually powerful way. It absorbs energy but changes temperature far more slowly than other substances, which means the oceans are the planet's colossal climate regulator. Because of water, Earth does not scorch during the day nor freeze at night. Because of water, our climate does not swing wildly like that of Mars or the Moon. The more we think about it, the clearer it becomes. Every cool sea breeze drifting toward the shore is a reminder that water is quietly keeping this planet habitable. But water's mysteries are not only about heat and cold, they also lie in its bonds. A water molecule behaves like a being that knows how to hold hands. It forms countless hydrogen bonds with its neighbors, creating a network both flexible and resilient. For this reason, water has extraordinarily high surface tension. Insects can walk on it, droplets can roll on lotus leaves, water can climb the height of a tree, defying gravity, delivering life to every leaf. And water is also the master solvent, dissolving salts, minerals, gases, organic molecules, the very ingredients of life. In the primordial oceans, it was this ability to dissolve, interact, and cradle other molecules that allowed amino acids to combine, self-replicating molecules to emerge, and the first cells to open their eyes to the world. Scientists can describe all this with formulas, charts, and molecular models, but viewed through the eyes of a lover of history, water resembles a midwife of life itself, embracing, protecting, moderating, and nurturing every fragile beginning. All these odd properties, expansion upon freezing, high heat capacity, hydrogen bonding, strong surface tension, extraordinary ability to dissolve, combine into a symphony so elegant that it feels almost intentional. If any one of them were even slightly different, life might never have begun, ecosystems might collapse, climate might swing so violently that no organism could endure. Humans might never exist to ask, what is water? The more we study it, the clearer it becomes. Water is not merely a liquid slipping through our fingers. It is the structural foundation of the living world. And because water is so unusual, humanity has always been drawn to the places where water gathers, especially the ones still shrouded in mystery. The deep ocean. A realm where sunlight never reaches. Where pressure can crush steel. Where creatures glow like distant stars. Where time seems slower and Earth's ancient history is preserved like an unread reel of film. If water is a miracle at the molecular level, the ocean is a miracle stretched across space. The deep sea is where water's properties create the perfect environment for strange life. Bioluminescent creatures, organisms living in hydrothermal vents, where heat and chemicals challenge every definition of normal life. To look into the deep ocean is not just to witness exotic species. It is to look into our own past, the birthplace of life. This is why the science of water, at its highest development, always leads us back to the ocean, the cradle of life, the dark chamber of the planet, the keeper of answers the land will never reveal. To understand this planet, we must first understand the sea. To understand the sea, we must first understand water's secrets. And as these secrets slowly unfold, humanity begins to recognize the ocean not merely as a physical space, but a spiritual one, a place where we sense our smallness, the world's vastness, and the thread connecting past and future. In that space, wakefulness and sleep intertwine. The sound of waves not only tells stories, but sets the rhythm of breath for those who listen. And so, from the smallest molecules, we now step into the largest realm of water, deeper than all valleys, wider than all plains, darker than all nights, and older than every story humanity has ever told. The ocean. There is a gentle paradox in human history. The more advanced we become, the more civilized, the higher we soar into the sky or burrow into the earth, the more we realize that we remain irresistibly drawn to one place, the deep sea. Not because the sea gives us answers, but because it asks questions we have never dared ask ourselves. In a sense, the ocean is the oldest mirror on the planet. Long before humans learned to use polished glass, long before civilizations carved their stories into stone, the sea's surface reflected our earliest gazes, and its dark depths stored the histories the land was too fragile to hold. Yet even though the ocean covers most of Earth's surface, we know astonishingly little about it. Humanity set foot on the moon before reaching the bottom of the Challenger Deep. We have clearer maps of Mars than of the Mariana Trench. In this way, the ocean is not merely difficult to access, it is the one place that makes humanity feel small. As with every great exploration in history, the journey into the deep began with something very human: curiosity. When the first boat left the shore, people were not simply searching for new land, they were seeking the feeling of stepping beyond their own limits. When the first submersible descended into the darkness, researchers were not only trying to see what lived below, they wanted to know whether something in themselves would change when confronted with that primordial blackness. For the deep sea is unlike any other place on Earth, a darkness where light cannot survive, a pressure that can crush steel, a temperature just above the threshold of freezing. And yet, in this seemingly impossible world, life exists in ways that defy imagination. At hydrothermal vents, temperatures reach 400 degrees, water boils in the darkness, chemical plumes rise like smoke from another world, and still, strange, luminous, otherworldly creatures thrive. They do not need sunlight. They do not need oxygen in the way we do. They live on minerals, on heat, on the rules of the deep that belong only to them. When humans first saw these beings, the emotion was not scientific excitement, but something like a spiritual tremor. If life can exist here, what else about this planet do we not understand? And deeper still, if life can begin in darkness, is light truly a requirement for existence? Questions not only for the ocean, but for ourselves. But the ocean guards more than the secrets of biology. It guards the memory of the planet, a kind of salty archive the land could never keep. The seafloor preserves traces of ancient climates, glacial ages, and volcanic upheavals that reshape the atmosphere. Deep ocean currents, colossal rivers in the dark, hold the planet's pulse in their silent movements. Each layer of sediment is a page of history, written in shells, ash, dead organisms, pollen, the quiet story of the world we inhabit. The strange truth is this: to understand the land, we must go to the sea. To understand our climate's future, we must read sediment cores thousands of meters underwater. To understand the origins of life, we must listen to heat and salt swirling in the ocean's depths. And in doing so, the ocean becomes a vast room into which we have only just stepped, holding a tiny lamp whose glow reaches only a few meters around us. The rest is darkness filled with unnamed mysteries. Exploring the ocean is also exploring the limits of being human. Every meter of depth is a challenge. Every submersible dive is a declaration that we are willing to confront fear, not the fear of death, but the fear of the unknown, the fear of standing before something immeasurable, the fear carried by every explorer staring into the abyss. What is down there? The ocean is not only wide, but also deep. It is a place where humanity sees itself, the desire to reach beyond, and the unease of facing what cannot be fully understood. And perhaps the most touching truth in this journey is this: no matter how far we go, humans always return to the sea, as if returning to the birthplace of our own existence. Because in the end, the first stirring of life was not on land, but in water. The first cells, the first molecules that learned to bond, the first breath of existence, all were cradled by the sea. When we return to the deep, we are traveling backwards through time, not by machine, but by the memory of life itself. That is why, when we look at the ocean, we do not only see the world, we see a part of ourselves, the primordial part, the silent part, the deep part we lost when we crawled onto land. But the ocean does not keep all its secrets to itself. It leaves us with a sign. Elsewhere in the solar system, on icy moons, distant worlds, water also exists. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, holds an underground ocean deeper than the Pacific. Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, sprays water into space through icy jets like frozen fireworks. Comets and asteroids carry traces of primordial water. These are not just targets of space science. They are echoes of Earth's own ocean, whispers that life may not be alone. And so, the horizon of water expands beyond any map ever drawn. From Earth's deep sea, humanity now lifts its gaze toward the sky, where other oceans, unseen but real, await their names. If there is a single moment that makes all of human history suddenly feel small, it is the moment we realize this. Water, something we once believed belonged only to Earth, is present throughout the universe. From wandering shards of ice drifting through space to the frozen moons of giant planets, water exists quietly, as though continuing a story whose first chapter we have only just begun to read. The wonder is this: wherever there is water, a familiar but never old question arises. Could life be there? And this question somehow slows the human heartbeat, not because we fear the answer, but because we sense we are standing at the border of something sacred, the boundary between life and the silent expanse of the cosmos. Let us begin with the oldest wanderers of the solar system, comets. A comet is not merely a streak of light crossing the sky. It is a chest of ancient memories, a mixture of ice, dust, and rock from the protoplanetary disk where the first planets were shaped. When a comet nears the sun, its ice vaporizes, trailing behind it a long, shimmering plume like a stretched thread of time. There is a hypothesis that has fascinated scientists for decades. These comets delivered water to the early Earth. In the violent collisions billions of years ago, they brought water and organic molecules, the first seeds of life. Science has not yet offered a final answer, but that image, wandering blocks of ice gifting life to a newborn glowing planet, is enough to make one pause, as if standing before origins no human has ever witnessed. Leaving these icy nomads, we turn to more stable, yet far more mysterious, worlds, the icy moons of giant planets. Among them, two names make the hearts of researchers beat differently: Europa of Jupiter and Enceladus of Saturn. Europa, a moon with an underground ocean deeper than the Pacific. Its surface is a white, fractured crust of ice, cracked like ancient palm lines. But beneath that crust, according to data from the Galileo spacecraft and many later missions, lies a vast ocean, containing more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. A dark ocean with no sunlight, warmed from within by tidal forces created by Jupiter. An ocean under immense but stable pressure. An ocean whose seafloor may host hydrothermal vents, just like the ones where life on Earth is believed to have begun. If life needed deep water to arise once, why not again here? Some scientists say that if humanity ever discovers extraterrestrial life, the first place may not be another planet, but the bottom of an alien ocean, where water is telling a story remarkably similar to Earth's billions of years ago. Enceladus, a tiny moon that dares to spray water into space. If Europa is the silent depth, Enceladus is the universe whispering. At its south pole, fractures in the surface shoot jets of water, more precisely, ice particles and vapor, straight into space like cold fireworks. When the Cassini spacecraft flew through these icy plumes, it detected something unbelievable: water, sea salt, organic compounds, signs of geothermal energy. A complete recipe for a potentially habitable environment. In that moment, Enceladus, a moon barely larger than a few U.S. states, became one of the brightest candidates for answering humanity's oldest question: are we alone? For wherever water rises of its own will to announce itself to the universe, there is something worth listening to. Looking even farther, water appears in places no one expected: frozen clouds on Mars, ice trapped in eternal shadow at the moon's poles, nebulae filled with water vapor, traces of water in the atmospheres of exoplanets. This leads to an idea more philosophical than scientific. Perhaps water is not the universe's exception. Perhaps life is the exception. If water is common, and if water nearly always opens the door to life, then Earth may be only one chapter in a cosmic book that the universe is still writing. But exploring water in the universe is not only a journey outward, it is a journey inward. When we see Europa's ocean, we see Earth in its infancy. When we watch Enceladus's plumes, we witness ancient hydrothermal vents reborn. When we search for water on Mars, we search for the missing chapters of life's history on the red planet. The cosmos, in this way, becomes a mirror reflecting what Earth once was and what it might yet become. And naturally, as our exploration of cosmic water expands, humanity returns to a question older than astronomy, older than religion, older than philosophy itself. If water can create life elsewhere, what would that life look like? Would it think? Would it dream? Would it look up at its sky and wonder whether someone else is looking back? This question makes the universe feel suddenly intimate, not an empty void, but a neighborhood whose residents we have not yet met. And at that moment, we understand. Studying water in the universe is not merely to satisfy curiosity, but to understand Earth more deeply, to understand ourselves more honestly, and to see that all life, wherever it appears, begins with a drop of water. But understanding cosmic water is only half the journey. The other half is our own story, humanity's story, in this century, when water is growing scarce, when climate is shifting, and when the future depends on choices made today. For if water is hope in the cosmos, then on Earth, water is becoming a warning. And to continue this journey, we must now look toward the technologies, efforts, and innovations striving to save every drop before it is too late. For millions of years, water flowed according to the unchanging laws of nature. But only in the past few centuries have humans altered that flow faster than any geological force ever could. Rivers shrink, lakes recede, groundwater drops, oceans grow polluted, and the climate, The backdrop for the water cycle's ancient choreography has become unstable, hotter, drier, drifting away from its familiar rhythms. The world knows it is living in an age unlike any other, an age in which water, once seen as an eternal foundation, has become a fragile variable. And in that breathless moment, hope begins to reveal itself in profoundly human forms: machines, technologies, engineering solutions, and humble, compassion-filled innovations. Not because technology can replace nature, that is an illusion, but because technology is becoming the only bridge between what we have lost and what we still might protect. Let us begin with one of the greatest questions of all. How do we create clean water in a world running out of it? The first answer lies in desalination technologies, turning seawater into fresh water. Once the realm of myth, desalination plants now operate every hour of every day across the globe. Along the coasts of the Middle East, from Israel to Saudi Arabia, from California's shoreline to Australia's sunburned edges, desalination has become the modern water tower of humanity. The technology is imperfect. It consumes enormous energy, produces concentrated brine, and puts pressure on marine ecosystems. But in places where freshwater no longer follows the seasons, desalination is a true lifeline. There are cities where every sip of water in a citizen's glass is born from a marriage of science and desperation. But not every place has a sea, and not every place has the energy to squeeze water from an ocean. Thus, another path has emerged: recycling wastewater. Though the idea may sound unpleasant, it is one of the most important scientific advancements of our era. Through nanofiltration membranes, ultraviolet purification, ozonation, and microbiological processes, wastewater can be purified to a level cleaner than bottled drinking water. In Singapore, Israel, California, wastewater is no longer something discarded, but part of a new cycle in which each drop is used many times rather than once and gone. In laboratories, engineers and scientists are doing in hours what nature requires decades to achieve: filtering, separating, and regenerating water. If there is a miracle in our time, it may be found in the droplets that seemed dead, yet are restored to life by technology. Another branch of hope lies in atmospheric water harvesting, pulling water not from rain, but from humidity itself, which exists even in the driest deserts. From large fog-catching nets in Morocco's arid ranges to atmospheric water generators used by armies, from nanomaterial absorbers to simple mesh screens strung across mountain ridges, all share the same philosophy. If the sky does not rain, borrow the mist. If the earth holds no well, create one from the wind. There are villages that survived on night fog alone, neighborhoods revived because of water drawn from the morning air. In a world running dry, such gentle, quiet solutions often shine the brightest. But water does not only need to be created, it must also be managed intelligently. Enter smart water management. Sensors buried underground alert authorities when pipes leak. Satellites monitor groundwater levels from space. AI forecasts seasonal consumption, adjusting distribution. Drones observe rivers and lakes, detecting pollution before human eyes can. Major cities now operate living water maps that change by hour, by day, by drought cycle. In this world, water is no longer a static resource, but a flow observed, understood, and optimized by artificial intelligence. To phrase it gently, water is being listened to more carefully than ever before. Yet no matter how advanced, technology cannot save the world alone. Saving water is not merely technical, it is behavioral, it is ethical, it is a choice. No technology can compensate for wasteful habits. No desalination plant can replace vanished wetlands. No recycling system can revive a river that is poisoned daily. True hope lies not in machines, but in the way we change our relationship with water. Some cities have banned lawn irrigation during drought. Some farms have switched to water-efficient crops. Some communities have revived entire streams simply by restoring forested headwaters. Children are being taught that water is not given, it is a loan from the future. And some nations are beginning to treat water not as a commodity, but as a heritage, something that cannot be used in one direction, but must be returned, nurtured, and protected. The water crisis of this century is real. But hope is also real. These two forces face each other like intertwining currents, forming a single question. Can technology repair the damage caused by humanity? And will we change fast enough to avoid crossing the point of no return? The answer has not yet appeared. But one thing is certain. The future of water, and our future, will not be determined solely by pipes, filters, and desalination plants, but by our understanding that water is not good or bad. It simply reflects how we treat it. And that reflection opens the next chapter, a chapter in which water appears not only as a physical current, but as a spiritual one, touching the deepest layers of memory and the human soul. After seeing water through the lens of science and crisis, we must now see it through the lens of ourselves. There are sounds that need no language, yet touch the deepest places within us. The wind through leaves, the soft crackle of fire in the dark, and above all, the sound of water, dripping, lapping, trickling, murmuring, the oldest sound our ancestors ever heard, long before humanity had concepts of history, psychology, or meditation. The sound of water is a form of memory, not personal memory, but evolutionary memory, something written into our bodies over millions of years, a primordial language that never disappears. As early humans lived on the dry savannas 200,000 years ago, finding water was not luck, it was survival. A stream did more than quench thirst. It signaled food, shade, and the movement routes of animals. The keenest hunter-gatherers knew one truth: where there is water, there is life. Because of this, the human brain is programmed to respond to the sound of water. When we hear it, the nervous system instantly shifts from vigilance to safety. Heart rate slows, cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. Breathing softens. No one teaches us this. It is instinct. Just as fire evokes warmth, water evokes peace. These signals once determined whether our ancestors survived the night. And today, even inside a modern room lit by LEDs and sealed with soundproof glass, the moment we play a track of running water, our bodies react as if we were sitting beside a wild, ancient forest stream. But it is not only sound. The visual presence of water holds a special psychological power. Think of the calm that arises when you look at a still lake. Something in time slows. Water becomes a mirror reflecting the mind, and because it is still, we become still. Science calls this soft fascination, gentle attention. It doesn't overstimulate, doesn't demand focus. Water creates a soft zone where the mind can rest without shutting down. In this state, creativity rises, emotions repair, and deeper thought becomes possible. There is a reason so many philosophers, monks, and poets turn to water. Heraclitus sat by a river to reflect on change. Zen master Linji listened to rain to understand impermanence. Basho wrote haiku beside the moat waters. Einstein liked to row because, as he said, that is when the mind rearranges itself. Water does not lecture, it reveals. And then there is this: 70% of our body is water. The sounds of water, biologically speaking, are like external echoes of what happens inside us. Waves mirror heartbeat rhythms. The frequency of rainfall aligns with alpha brainwaves, the relaxed state just before sleep. This is why newborns sleep to the sound of rain, because it resembles what they heard in the womb, where water was the first environment of their existence. Water, in this way, is both primordial memory and lullaby. Yet water does more than soothe, It connects. Standing before a vast ocean, humans feel small, but it is a comforting smallness, not despair. In that moment, the isolated self dissolves into something larger. The sea does not erase us, it makes us less alone. Psychologists call this awe, the overwhelming feeling before something immense. Awe consoles and reorients us. It reminds us that our lives are not the center of the universe, that our problems have boundaries, that the world is far wider than our anxieties. Through its vastness, water teaches us to let go. Another effect, restorative power. After a long, exhausting day, walking along the shore or standing before a waterfall refreshes the mind, not in a mystical sense, but in a deeply psychological one. The brain is reset by simplicity of movement, rhythm, and color. Water has no sharp edges, no threat, no chaotic noise, no danger signals. It flows. And when we watch it flow, our thoughts begin to flow too, leaving stress, returning to clarity. But what makes water such a powerful psychological symbol is its ability to hold both peace and turbulence. A brook can lull you to sleep, rain can comfort you, yet crashing waves can warn you, rising water can frighten you. This combination, gentle yet fierce, makes water the perfect reflection of the human soul. Not stable, not fixed, but always trying to return to balance. We look at water to understand ourselves. We listen to water to hear ourselves. In that moment, water ceases to be a physical substance. It becomes a psychological entity, a silent teacher, a soft mirror, a meditative space we can always return to. That is why the final movement of the Blue Gold journey cannot be only about history, science, or crisis. It must return to people, because in every story of water, humanity is both user and destroyer, guardian and child soothed to sleep by its sound. And before the story ends, we must place water where it truly belongs. Water is neither good nor bad. It simply reflects the nature of the one who looks into it. The prose softens, the breath slows, preparing for the final chapter, where water rises not as a physical flow, but as a philosophical mirror, revealing the deepest traces humanity has left on this planet. There are chapters of history that, when they reach their end, do not close like a door but open like a mirror. And the story of water, from the first droplets on Earth to the distant oceans scattered across the universe, is exactly such a chapter. We began this journey by seeing water as a miracle, the substance that creates life, sustains civilization, shapes continents, guides geography, commerce, technology, and even the human mind. But in the end, one realizes water has never changed. Only humans change when they look at it. For water, in the truest sense, is neither good nor bad. It simply reflects. It reflects the greed of those who wish to claim a river for themselves. It reflects the wisdom of those who entrust the future to every drop. It reflects the impatience of civilizations that collapse when they forget the role of water. And it reflects the resilience of communities that learn to live with nature across generations. If we look back across this 4.5 billion year journey, we discover a gentle truth. Water has always been the mirror, and humanity the one who gazes into it. When people used water to steward rivers, to build, to cultivate, to develop, water became the foundation of prosperity. When people used water for war, for power struggles, for deforestation, for pollution, water became the force that swept them away. There is no punishment in this, no reward either, no moral code inside water, only the reflection of human choices. What makes water miraculous is not merely its physical properties, though its strange behaviors, from expanding when frozen to surface tension, solubility, and the water cycle, truly are extraordinary. The miracle of water lies instead in this. By understanding it, we understand ourselves. In water, we see softness, the ability to overcome stone without ever tensing a muscle. We see patience, the way a single drop can wear down a mountain wall. We see adaptability, no fixed shape, yet always finding a path forward. We see honesty, reflecting everything exactly as it is, without hiding, without exaggerating. And if we strip away the noise of the modern world, the concrete, steel, engines, and daily calculations, the clearest reflection water offers is a question. What kind of person do we wish to see in that mirror? In the 21st century, as climate change becomes undeniable, as drought spreads, as ice melts faster, as cities confront water scarcity, and as nations begin to treat water as the next form of geopolitical power, that question is no longer philosophical. It is real. The future of water is inseparable from the future of humankind. If we continue consuming without restraint, water will reflect our fear. If we treat it with care, water will reflect the peace we long for. In every choice, water simply waits, like a lake awaiting the touch of a hand. Disturb the surface, and the water stirs. Leave it still, and the water stays still. And like every mirror, water shows us things we may not always want to see. Societal fractures, inequities in access, rivers sacrificed for convenience, oceans smothered in plastic, and aquifers drained for short-term profit. But water does not remind us to shame us. It reminds us to awaken. For history shows one lesson clearly. No empire lasts if it forgets the foundation it stands on. Those who hold water hold life. But those who treat water as infinite lose it sooner than they imagine. Yet even within this reflection, we find hope. Hope in communities restoring dead streams. Hope in scientists drawing water from dry air. Hope in farmers shifting to water-saving practices. Hope in younger generations who see water not as a commodity, but as a shared inheritance of all humankind. Water, though silent, always invites us to change, not to change it, but to change how we see it. And when this long journey of the series comes to its close, what we gain is not only knowledge of water, we gain knowledge of ourselves, of what makes humanity strong, what makes it fragile, and what makes it worthy of the future it seeks. For water, throughout all its stories, speaks only one message: be the person you wish to see reflected in me. As the narrative softens, as the imagined sound of water becomes more distant yet somehow clearer, the story does not close. Water has never been a chapter with an ending. It is a current, flowing while we sleep, while we wake, while the world changes, while the planet breathes. And in the final whisper of this chapter, water leaves a message. Blue gold does not lie in water itself. Blue gold lies in human hands, in the choices we make about how to treat the very last drop. An open message, so that as we step into any future journey of knowledge, we remember. We study history to live more wisely in the present, and we understand water to learn how to be gentle, enduring, and strong, just like its flow.